I'm sorry I even asked you to come with me. I don't know what I was thinking.
No, a part of me wanted to go, you know, of course, but I'm not your wife anymore, so.
Hey, you're still my wife. Technically speaking.
They say that life imitates art, and if that's true of our guests' work, then we're all living in an alien-infested time travel reality show with Russian spies. Noah Emmerich of The Americans, which airs on FX, joins us now, and his directorial debut of The Americans premieres this evening. So we're going to keep the interview relatively short so none of us miss it. Thank you for joining us. This show is about, for those who haven't seen it, a married couple who are Russian spies during the Cold War. You play an FBI agent. How is it that the makers of the show somehow have us all rooting not for the FBI agent, but for the Soviet spies?
It's casting. Cast me, and you're going to root for the other.
You've just become a villain.
You know, I don't know. It's actually a really interesting question. It was one of the big questions of the show, I think, before we went into production, was will the American audience be able to relate and root for Russian spies who are working to take down America? You know, it is actually, I joke, but it is cast. I mean, Matthew Rhys and Kerry Russell are incredibly empathic characters, actors. We connect to their humanity. And in some ways, the show is more about the relationships and the actual human beings inside those roles than the function they're serving as characters. I think we think of them as a married couple first before we think of them as spies.
Murderous communists.
Murderous communists. It's an amazing what you can get away with your characters if you really relate to the characters and connect to them. They are murdering random people, they're abusing people, they're deceiving people, but we are rooting for them, I think mostly as a couple, mostly for them to make it as a family, as parents and as husband and wife.
We were all just talking before we started to tape this about, we're all contemporaries, basically all graduated from college around the same time. So we were in college and in high school in the middle of the Reagan years at the height of that, the Cold War, as in that, you know, what's actually this center of the show, that time frame.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about the degree to which that attracted you to the project, and you were kind of politically active when you were a kid, so like how does that inform the way your performance and how you do this work?
You know, I wouldn't say it informs the performance, but it really is fascinating to sort of revisit a time which I was conscious and active and alive in, and with an adult point of view, with obviously hindsight, and also coming to it as essentially my own father in some ways. I'm the age that my father was when I was a kid in the 80s. So it is really interesting to revisit that time as a grown-up. I remember as a kid I was really scared. I really felt fearful of thermonuclear, you know, disaster.
It was the era of the day after.
Yeah, it was.
You know,
exactly.
It was an incredible television event at the time, right? Yeah.
And it was a real fear. It was viscerally present that, you know, you went to bed at night wondering if it was going to, maybe you guys didn't, but I had a troubled childhood.
I was big into duck and cover.
Yeah.
I had it all taken care of.
So it is sort of like a revisitation of my own life in an odd way.
How'd your directorial debut go? We're going to see it tonight.
Yeah,
How'd it go?
It was a lot of fun. It was sort of like going from being a student in the school to being the headmaster of the school.
Bossing all the actors around.
Yeah, bossing everybody around, getting to really see the amount of work and effort and sweat that goes into creating this sort of setting for the actors to do their work. You know, actors show up on the set, and all that pre-production work has been done. All the costumes and props and locations and sets and choices have been made, and we show up and we get to just play in that fantasy world. And going behind the scenes as a director and having to sort of put in all that work to set that table for the actors was really eye-opening. I have a deeper appreciation for our phenomenal crew in the various departments that do all the work that they do. It's astounding how much work goes into that.
It's kind of hard to make Brooklyn look like D.C., but you do it every week.
Not just Brooklyn like D.C., but Brooklyn 2015 looked like D.C. 1983. It's a big leap.
There are parts of Brooklyn that haven't really left the 1980s.
Yes.
In that sense, it's lucked out.
That's the part I live in. I'm curious about whether you think that you guys, in some ways, obviously the world has not gotten lucky in the sense that there's now this geopolitical actual tension between Russia and the United States, which wasn't the case for the past 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
Do you guys think you guys have gotten lucky in a weird way that there is now this heightened tension in the sense that it creates a kind of resonance on the part of the audience that now watches the show in this context?
I think it's a double-edged sword. You know, I think people who are under 35 really don't have any concept of Russia as being this evil oppositional force to America. On the other hand, as you touched upon before, our leads are Russian, and we want them to be sympathetic and be rooted for. And the fact that Russia and the United States are so sort of oppositional, I think it makes it more difficult in some ways. But it does get us a lot of press. It does make it more contemporary feeling. I think it gives the audience, the younger audience, a clearer understanding of that old dynamic which has resurfaced.
Great arc for you as someone dabbling in Est on the show.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a lot of younger viewers of the program, not just of our program, but of your program, have no idea what Est is. Did you know a lot about Est? Did you do research?
I did a little bit of research. I remember hearing about Est when I was a kid. Yeah. The only thing I remember is that you weren't allowed to go to the bathroom. That was sort of everybody talked about the fact that there were these 14-hour intense seminars and you were not allowed to leave the room. That's all I really can recall from my childhood. But, and S continues to this day in different forms. It's sort of migrated into different names because there was some trouble, I think, with their organization. But it is interesting. It's very representative of sort of that New Age thinking at the time, the sort of self-help, beginning of that movement really proliferating in the United States. And it's pretty fun. I mean, I love that we opened the season with Philip and Stan at an S seminar, which I think was completely out of left field. No one could have anticipated that. And it was really a lot of fun to do.
It's an awesome scene.
Oh, thanks.
You've had a wide-ranging career. You've been doing this for a while. You've done television, you've done movies. You played a lot of memorable parts in a lot of things. I can't imagine that there's anything, though, that you get more commentary about than the Truman Show, because that show has become kind of a cultural icon in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
What do people say? I mean, over the years, what do people say to you about that show? How often do people come up to you and talk about it? And what does it mean to them?
It's interesting, it has definitely evolved in terms of the dynamic of how people approach me. And for the first 5 years, I got a lot of people who would come up to me on the street and sort of be very angry with me and berate me for, how could you do that? Your best friend, you betrayed your best friend, and I would sort of remind them that I was an actor and I wasn't, in fact, the character from the movie. On the other hand, that's a great compliment, that they really take it in, they really feel it, and they really experience it as you being that person. So again, it's a double-edged sword. You play a hero and people think you're heroic, and you play a duplicitous character and people tend to conflate your fictional self with your real self. But it is incredibly resonant, and I think, in hindsight, incredibly prescient. At the time that we made that movie, there was no real reality television. It was just the very beginning. And now the Truman Show is sort of on television. I mean, people, between Real World and Big Brother, and I don't even know all the shows, but people are, and there's a phenomenon that psychoanalysts now refer to as the Truman Show phenomenon. People actually have delusions that they are Truman in the Truman Show, that their life is being covered by cameras and that the whole world is a setup. It's a real psychological happening.
I was going to say that actually sounds like probably an accurate perception on the part of a lot of people.
Right. I mean,
they're really
yeah. So it is one of the more common pieces of work that I get recognized for, and it's. I think I underestimated the impact of it at the time, because it's still, here it is, quite a few years later, and I still get a lot of feedback from that.
Who do you follow on Twitter who you like? I ask because Jim Carrey loves to tweet about you.
Oh, Jim Carrey, yeah. I follow Jim Carrey on Twitter. We've remained good friends since that film.
He described you on Twitter at one point as his best friend. Was that hyperbole?
I think he's definitely one of my dearest and closest friends.
Okay. So who else do you like on Twitter?
Another one of my dearest and closest friends, Joshua Malina, who's an actor who I went to college with, who's on that show Scandal. He's a prolific Twitterer. He tweets a lot. I have sort of had a bad year of Twitter. I haven't done any tweeting.
You're not going to tweet your own episode?
I'm actually working tonight. I'm going to miss my own episode because we're shooting a night shoot. So it's unfortunate.
For aficionados of the show, there's basically two kinds of episodes. There's ones with the nudity warning and ones without. Your episode, a little bit of a spoiler, nudity, no nudity. You don't remember?
Let me recall. There's a little bit of nudity. There's some actually quite alluring nudity.
The voice of the FX announcer who announces that this episode has nudity, that guy has got a lot of pizzazz.
He does?
Yeah.
That's me.
It's you?
I do character voices.
Yeah, it's very strong.
Fantastic. The other thing you've been in recently, and you were not in it for very much time, but that is also a huge phenomenon, is Walking Dead. The creators of that show have expressed some regret about the way in which the first season ended and the end of your character. And there's been some rumor about the possibility you might come back and be involved in some kind of a prequel. Can you give us any news break on that?
You know, I have sadly no insight, or I'm not hiding anything. I haven't had any conversations with anyone. I mean, I know people really responded to the character that I played, Dr. Jenner, on the show. Yeah. He had a really sort of grand entrance and a grand arc, and he died very quickly thereafter, and I think people thought there could be more of him. I'm certainly open to the idea. It was a fascinating character, but there's been no conversations that I've been a part of.
Well, I vote yes for that. If you give,
okay.
If they offer you that, take that job, because I'd like to see more of Dr. Jenner.
Did you know any FBI agents before? Do you know any now, since you play one?
I have met a couple of FBI agents. I did a film called Fair Game with Naomi Watts that Doug Liman directed a few years back about Valerie Plame, and I met some CIA agents and some FBI agents at the time. And in the beginning of this job, we have some FBI consultants who have helped me sort of guide me through the realities of the Bureau.
How are you most like J. Edgar Hoover?
My wardrobe. But we can't talk about that now.
No, you mean not your current wardrobe, but
no,
off hours.
Yeah.
Right, or your private wardrobe. Of all the things you've done that people, that you'd like to point, if there were obscure pieces of work that you've done that you're particularly proud of, what are the things you've done that you would most point people to who want to really go deep dive on Noah Emmerich?
Wow, you know, I tend not to point people to my own work. I find it
come on,
difficult.
Just for us.
There's a film I made with one of my dearest friends and most frequent collaborators, Gavin O'Connor, who directed the pilot of this show, in fact, a movie called Pride and Glory. That's a New York cop drama with Edward Norton and Colin Farrell and John Voight and a bunch of great people.
Wow, it's an incredible cast.
Not a lot of people saw. I think it's a really strong film. It's dark, but it's really interesting, great piece of work. That's one of them.
I'm definitely going to download that.
All right, you're a New York guy, right? Grew up in Manhattan?
I am.
In what ways are you like a New Yorker?
You know, when I was a kid growing up in New York,
the turnstiles?
I used to before they started doing the broken windows policy.
Sorry, I interrupted you. So growing up?
You know, I was the perfect audience for that classic New Yorker cover of, you know, everything west of the Hudson. It seemed like I didn't really understand the geography of the United States. I mean, we have a terrible educational system for geography in this country, but I think New York City is maybe even worse. We really do feel like we're the center of the universe, and
well, you know why that is.
Because we are.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a New Yorker. I'm a second-generation New Yorker.
What are your teams?
Sadly,
no teams.
I have no teams. Not really.
Do you like the Empire State Building?
I love the Empire State Building. And I like the new lights. I know they're a little controversial, but I love the new lighting system that they have on the Empire State.
What's your favorite borough besides Manhattan?
Brooklyn.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I'm just.
We shoot in Brooklyn. I spend a lot of time in Brooklyn. Brooklyn's an amazing borough.
Yeah.
Staten Island is the most fascinating borough. I don't know if you spent any time there. I had not actually spent any time there before I shot this film, Little Children. Which is another one of those obscure ones I like to point people to, because that's also, I think, a really interesting film. But it's a foreign land.
Yeah, right. It is.
It's the closest you can get to a foreign land from Manhattan.
You know what they call the ferry from Staten Island to Manhattan?
What's that?
The Manhattan Ferry. Not the Staten Island.
Really?
Yes.
They do?
We learned that the other day when we were over there. Noah Emmerich, thank you.
And it's free.
And it's free.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Hot dogs on that ferry.
He did a little promo here for the Manhattan Ferry. Thanks again. His directorial debut, as we said, of The Americans premieres this evening on FX, and we'll be right back.